As far as the crime committed against Boris Yefimovich Nemtsov is concerned, I knew him personally, and our relationship was certainly not always sour. It was he who chose the path of political struggle, personal attacks, and so on. I was used to it, and besides, he was not the only one. However, that doesn't mean you have to kill him.
On February 27, 2015, the leader of the democratic opposition in Russia was killed with 5 shots to his back in the center of Moscow, on the Bolshoy Moskvoretsky Bridge. Who could be behind this crime? The murder happened only several hundred yards away from the Kremlin. The entire territory adjacent to President Putin's main residence is controlled by the Federal Protective Service, monitored around the clock by surveillance cameras, and is patrolled by officers of the Ministry of Interior Affairs.
They committed murder practically on the Red Square, which is impossible to do without cooperating with Russian special services. They did not only commit the crime, but also managed to escape from the crime scene. Just try raising a Ukrainian flag in the middle of Moskvoretsky Bridge. My cameraman was arrested there. I have been detained there as well. The Federal Protective Service is in charge of this area.
The Kremlin is the most protected facility in Russia. However, the criminal case opened on Nemtsov's murder doesn't include video footage, recorded by the multiple Federal Protective Service surveillance cameras. The most likely reason for the FPS to refuse to cooperate is that the cameras show Putin's special service officers being involved in the crime.
A murder in the area under FPS control could never happen without the involvement of FPS. To claim otherwise would be sheer nonsense.
According to the investigation, preparations for Boris Nemtsov's assassination, including physical surveillance, began in October of 2014. Since Nemtsov would frequently move around on foot, the killers had plenty of time to set up an attack in a quiet, empty back alley.
Last time I saw Boris was 9 days before his death. He used to come to the Solidarity office late at night when it was dark outside, walking through obscure back alleys nearby Tretyakovskaya metro station. Boris was never afraid of Moscow and loved to travel by foot. Last time he arrived around 8 p.m., spent about an hour with us and left. He walked home alone. If they simply wanted to kill him, this would have been the perfect opportunity.
The assassins chose to commit their crime on the territory protected by the FPS, instead of a quiet back alley.
I believe it was a completely practical decision. Moscow is packed with policemen and surveillance cameras. Any activity in downtown Moscow is likely to be recorded on camera or noticed by a police officer. The center of the bridge is the only spot where there is no police presence whatsoever. If we agree that the FPS was involved, this would be an ideal place. You can see everything that's going on at the center of the bridge. At 11:30 p.m., the FPS should have had everything under control. They control all the cameras.
For 4 months, the assassins were tracking Nemtsov's movements around Moscow. The Federal Security Service was watching him 24/7 and wouldn't have missed a group of unknown men following him.
Nemtsov kept complaining that he was under surveillance, that the Federal Security Service agents were following him all the time. Their guidelines clearly state that in case they come across a parallel surveillance team, they should report it to their superiors. Such people are to be identified and background checked. At the very least, these individuals should have been detained and interrogated in order to find out why they were following Nemtsov. However, there was no reaction from the Federal Security Service agents. That means they were perfectly aware of who these people were and what their intent was.
The men charged with the murder were arrested 6 days after the assassination, the shortest investigation of a political contract killing in Russia's modern history. This is further proof that the leadership of the FSB knew about the hitmen ahead of time. 4 of the assassins were officers of the Sever Regiment of the Ministry of Interior Affairs. The perpetrators had no personal reasons to commit this crime, and they couldn't take 6 months' leave to travel to Moscow without the express permission of their commanders.
These men are very disciplined, and Kadyrov highly commended them. He called them patriots and seasoned war veterans. Such people could only have been acting under Kadyrov's orders, and Kadyrov certainly coordinated with special service agencies.
At the moment of the crime, two assassins, Dadaev and Geremeyev, were away on assignment and carrying their government-issued firearms. The commander of the Sever Regiment reports to General Viktor Zolotov and to the president of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov.
These are Putin's troopers. These men are from the Sever Battalion. They're fiercely loyal to Mr. Kadyrov and essentially are the backbone of his power. More generally, they're a part of the Ministry of Interior Affairs forces, headed by General Viktor Zolotov, who, by the way, is close friends with Ramzan Kadyrov and used to be one of Putin's chief bodyguards.
Viktor Zolotov is Ramzan Kadyrov's patron, and it is thanks to him that Kadyrov has direct access to Putin. General Viktor Zolotov and Putin have been close friends ever since their time working together in St. Petersburg. Zolotov was chief of Putin's protective detail and the deputy director of the Federal Protective Service until the fall of 2013. Once he became the commander of the Ministry of Interior Affairs, he retained a great deal of influence in the FPS, which provides security for the Kremlin and controls all access to the facility. At the time of the assassination, the chief of the FPS was Yevgeny Murov, also one of Putin's henchmen. Pete Early, an expert in special services, quotes the story told by Alexander Lunkin, deputy director of the FPS, in his book Comrade J. Lunkin said that he had been with both men in Moscow when Alexander Voloshin's name had been mentioned. Murov and Zolotov had talked openly about Putin's feelings of jealousy towards Voloshin and the political power he wielded. Putin wanted to fire the Grey Cardinal, but for political reasons couldn't. Murov and Zolotov had suddenly begun discussing ways to murder Voloshin. One idea was to kill him and blame Chechen terrorists. Another was to make his execution appear to be a hit by the Russian mafia, the result of some sordid business deal gone bad. Murov and Zolotov decided to make a list of politicians and other influential Muscovites whom they would need to assassinate to give Putin unchecked power. After the two men finished their list, Zolotov announced, "There are too many. It's too many to kill, even for us." Zolotov, Murov, and Kadyrov are Putin's men who would not be able to decide independently to kill a Russian opposition leader in downtown Moscow.
Ramzan Kadyrov – это не самостоятельная фигура.
Ramzan Kadyrov is not an independent figure. He's completely controlled by the Kremlin.
100% контролируется Кремлем.
Though Kadyrov might not know some things and didn't attend universities, he's perfectly aware that the decision regarding the life and death of Boris Nemtsov lies in Daddy's domain. By doing anything to Nemtsov, Kadyrov would be crossing the red line and entering the territory under Daddy's jurisdiction. Putin wouldn't tolerate people like Kadyrov calling shots in this area.
Kadyrov strictly followed the rules of the game established by Putin. And 10 days after Nemtsov's murder, Putin awarded Kadyrov a Medal of Honor.
Putin is my idol. My idol is Putin. I love him. I am very, very, very devoted to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. We say to the whole world that we are Vladimir Putin's combat troops. And if we get an order, we'll prove with our actions that this is the case.
A year after the assassination, Putin extended Kadyrov's term as the president of Chechnya.
Your term is going to expire on April 5th. Given your achievements over the last several years, today I will sign a decree appointing you as the acting president of Chechnya. I hope you will be able to stand for re-election this September. Thank you for having faith in me. We'll do our best to prove you right, and we will serve you hand and foot, Vladimir Vladimirovich. If you have some critical comments or guidelines, please let us know, and we will try our best to fulfill them 100%.
Viktor Zolotov was also rewarded. Putin promoted Zolotov to 4-star general, appointed him as commander of the Russian National Guard, and made him a member of the Russian National Security Council.
Putin переформировал все силовые структуры страны.
Putin has restructured all of Russia's securities agencies by selecting 400,000 most efficient fighters and transferring them over to a new entity, the National Guard, which is personally managed by General Zolotov.
Подчиненную уже ему лично. Более того,
Moreover, Putin made Zolotov a permanent member of the Security Council, a modern analog of the Soviet Politburo.
советской аналогии ввел его в состав Политбюро.
In the year following Nemtsov's assassination, not one of the alleged conspirators was ever interrogated. Nemtsov's family requested that Kadyrov and Zolotov be interrogated, but the investigators refused.
We were hoping that by the end of the summer, the investigators would manage to find Geremeyev, interrogate Kadyrov, etc., but that didn't happen.
Следствие настолько активно.
Initially, the investigation was so active that it even requested to interrogate Kadyrov's close aides Geremeyev and Delimkhanov. There were rumors about interrogating Kadyrov himself. This was such a shock to Putin, such a dramatic development, such enthusiasm on behalf of the Federal Security Service and the Investigative Committee that, as we remember, Putin even disappeared from public for a couple of weeks.
Недели на две из политического поля.
The investigators had tried twice to press charges in absentia against Ruslan Geremeyev, an officer in the Ministry of Interior Affairs who was allegedly in charge of the assassins. Both times, Alexander Bastrykin, the head of the investigative committee, refused to sign an indictment. There's only one man in Russia who can direct the court and the investigative committee not to interrogate obvious suspects.
Сегодня уже ясно, что с Немцовым расправилась власть действующая.
Today it is clear that the current government murdered Nemtsov. What we see today in terms of what is going on with the investigation, which failed to interrogate the key eyewitnesses and has no desire to do so, what we hear in their clumsy explanations and clarifications clearly indicates that the government made a political decision to let it slide.
The most likely sequence of events was the following. In the summer of 2014, Putin instructed Viktor Zolotov and Yevgeny Murov to organize Nemtsov's assassination. Zolotov conveyed Putin's orders down to Kadyrov. Kadyrov assembled a team of assassins out of Chechen officers of the Ministry of Interior Affairs. Zolotov secured the cooperation of the troops, while Murov involved the Federal Protective Service. In October, the officers began to track Nemtsov's movements around Moscow. The FSB, which was following Nemtsov, discovered the parallel surveillance by Kadyrov's men, realized their purpose, but didn't intervene. The goal of the FSB was to quickly detain the assassins after the crime was committed, in order to weaken Kadyrov's position in Putin's inner circle. Once Putin realized that the rivalry between Kadyrov and the FSB was a threat to the stability of the regime, he instructed the investigative committee to freeze the investigation of Nemtsov's murder at the level of the assassins.
Путин говорил о сакральной жертве, а я к этому отношусь очень серьезно.
Putin was talking about a sacrificial victim, and I take this very seriously. If a high-ranking KGB man, and there is no such thing as a former KGB man, who has all special service agencies under his command, mentions that there is a plot to assassinate an opposition leader, it means that A, he has such information, and B, if he does not prevent such an assassination, even though he has every capability to stop it, it means that he is the organizer. Therefore, if anything happens to any member of the Opposition Coordination Council, we should know who is behind it.